Hello and good evening. Welcome to Conversations with Mary Ann. I am Mary Ann Okon and we are broadcasting live from Lagos, Nigeria. I'm a broadcast journalist, and as usual, every Friday we get to talk about stories from different parts of Africa. The last time we were here, we were talking about Kenya, and today, Guinea Bissau is the country where we're visiting. And of course, if you have been following the news, you'd obviously know that Guinea has experienced a coup d'etat that has ousted its president, and now the military has taken over. Now, for many coup d'etats that we have seen over the years, you would actually not see that type of rejoicing in the streets, but in the streets of Guinea, especially the capital, we saw a lot of people streaming out to the streets and rejoicing, and one would wonder why. Well, today my guest is um, a very knowledgeable person in terms of international relations, public relations, and he's also a political analyst. He hails from Ghana. I hope that I can pronounce his name properly. He is Michael Kwadwo Nketia. He is an international relations and political analyst expert. Thank you very much for joining us, Michael. Thank you for joining us, Michael. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thanks for having me on the show, and good
Great.
evening to all your viewers across the globe.
I'm excited because you fit the bill to analyze this. Now, I have talked with many people. I've spoken to an expert from DR Congo. I've spoken to someone from Boston on the same issue, but you seem to be more knowledgeable, about what's happened in Guinea. Now, for every person, what we know is what we've seen in the news, the headlines, the video that hit, the news channels where we saw the president in company of soldiers at the presidential palace. It did come as a shock to many, knowing that we've had Chad experience its own coup d'état. We've also seen Mali experience its coup d'état, and now we have Guinea. Can you give us a clear picture of what you think led to that coup d'état?
Well, again, good evening to your viewers. To be precise and accurate, I would say that I wasn't surprised with the outcome of events in Conakry. Guinea as a country has a problematic past history with political instability and the overthrow of governments, mostly by the military. Before we begin to analyze how we got here, we have to first know where we were before we got here. President Alpha Conde, as an opposition leader in Guinea, was himself arrested and imprisoned for several years due to his advocacy for the rule of law and the return of the country to democratic rule. This same person had the opportunity to be elected as a democratically elected president, and he changed the country's constitution to guarantee for himself and his loyalists a third-term presidential bid, which was quite unconstitutional. Hence, President Alpha Conde's decision to seek a third term in office as president of Guinea was in itself unconstitutional, and it laid the foundation of what we are currently witnessing as a political coup d'etat or the military overthrow of his government. Why were people rejoicing? In the 21st century, when we appear to be getting away or doing away with military dictatorship, military coup d'etat, why were people so much in support of the recent happenings in Conakry? First, the opposition that decided to mount a serious resistance to his third term bid were harassed, they were arrested, they were imprisoned. And by the time he was overthrown, there were more than 700 political prisoners in Guinea. A majority of these people were arrested on the mere suspicion of being part of the coalition of opposition party that were against the third term bid of President Alpha Conde. And it will interest you to note that in our part of the world, to be precise, sub-Saharan Africa, any decision by an incumbent government to seek to unilaterally change the constitution of a country and seek a third term bid often results in some form of violence, tensions, and political instability. And this is exactly what happened in 2020, last year, when Alpha Conde amended the country's constitution in 2019, when he unilaterally organized elections when opposition parties were against the elections and fraudulently stole the mandate and the verdict of the people by rigging the elections. There were huge public outcry and protests against his election as president for the third term. So we shouldn't be surprised that instead of people being against the military overthrow in coup d'etat, there was a mass public support for the coup plotters, which shouldn't have been the case. And the foundation and basis of this mass public support is because Alpha Conde himself is an illegitimate leader per the Guinean constitution. And he was ruling the country by the power of the bat of the gun, other than the choice or mandate of the ordinary people in Guinea. And that tells us why so many people are in support of the coup.
Michael, let me just come in there because you said that it's not supposed to be, people are not supposed to be excited about the fact that he was being ousted in with a coup d'état. But then there are consequences, aren't there? Because we, as much as tough as the president can be, because I mean there are situations, especially where I'm from in Nigeria, it seems like the cries of the people seem to fall on deaf ears. But then being excited about a coup d'etat and the soldiers now taking power, they're answerable to no one. So what is the difference? And really, a soldier can tell us on camera that they're trying to bring back the sanity to the country, but really, in essence, who checks the soldiers?
Well, person and by principle, due to Africa's past brutish history with military dictators, I'm not in support of the military overthrow of any government, whether civilian or another military regime. However, if Alpha Conde ruled against the wishes of the people, who are we as outsiders to question the acceptability of a new government by the very people that Alpha Conde was ruling against? Of course, there are instances where the military may exact brutalities, atrocities. First, after the coup d'etat, they imposed a nationwide curfew to restrict the movement and activities of people across the country, which in itself is a human rights violation. However, these things are normalized when there is a change in government or there is a military overthrow of a government. What we must know and what we must understand is that this military overthrow in Guinea was self-inflicted. If you look at the leadership of the military junta that overthrew Alpha Conde, the gentleman who led the coup was himself brought in from France by Alpha Conde. And when Conde decided to seek a third term, some of his military top commanders were against it, and he arrested majority of them, sacked majority of them, and promoted very young, dynamic, energetic soldiers who were not even up to the rank then to be his armor bearers, to surround him, to protect him. And these are the very people that orchestrated, engineered, and executed the coup d'etat. So I'm not happy about it. Everybody should not be happy. This is the 21st century we are talking about. The Chinese are taking over the world. People are going to moon. People are going to space. People are creating artificial intelligence to solve almost every basic problem across societies. And here we are in West Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa to be particular, and we are still grappling with the menace of military coup d'etat, which happened centuries and several years ago in other parts of the world. In other parts of the world, they don't want anything to do with military coup d'etat. This was a self-inflicted pain or agony by Alpha Conde. I think if anybody should be blamed, it should be President Conde himself.
I'm curious, and I've asked this question many times, and I'm going to still ask it. Why do we have African leaders? And this is more, it happens more on the continent. We have leaders who try so hard to want to run for an office, and they seem to have the best interest of the people at heart. Seem, underline the word seem. But then you try so hard, and then you finally get the opportunity to be in office, but then you never get to deliver. You turn against the same people you promised to serve. And this is the case. that we've seen with Alpha Conde. In my country, my president tried 4 times to be president. Now, in Nigeria, we have so many problems. We have insecurity on one hand, we have, and that's insecurity is hydra-headed. We have Boko Haram, we have banditry, we have non-state actors creeping up from all sides of the country, and we do have a leader who seems to be mum about it, even though he speaks up about it, but we're not really dealing with issues. The economy is taking a deep dive, and we've seen these types of leaders all across the continent, and then the people are whipping and gnashing their teeth. Why is this very prevalent on the African continent?
To begin with, I would say that the reason why the leaders on the continent in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa in particular, they are having their way with the people is the refusal of the masses to stand up and demand what is right for their respective countries. We talk about institutions. It would interest you to know how can former President Jacob Zuma of South Africa be held accountable for the corrupt practices he administered while serving as president, and even be jailed when same cannot happen in other West African countries. We are talking about institutions in countries where the rule of law work. And I repeat, in countries where the rule of law work, there are strong institutions which prevent leaders from abusing their office. And it's quite unfortunate. Yesterday, I had an interview with the West African Democracy Radio, and I was citing the example that the overthrow of Alpha Conde should not just be taken lightly. Similar issues can replicate in the Ivory Coast, in Togo, where Faure Gnassingbé is virtually ruling the country not because the people have voted for him. He came to power in the first place as a hereditary president, someone who was imposed upon the Togolese people because his father died and the military leadership felt he was the right person to lead the country simply because his father was president. You look at the Ivory Coast, where Alassane Ouattara fought Laurent Gbagbo. More than 10,000 people died during the Ivorian Civil War just because Laurent Gbagbo decided to unilaterally seek a third term in office. When he lost the elections, which was conducted by his own electoral commissioner, he refused to hand over power to the newly elected president. Amidst all the call by the international community for him to hand over power, he still insisted, which degenerated into a civil war and led to the loss of more than 10,000 people, the death of 10,000 people. The very man who succeeded him, who campaigned against a third term in office, who promised to do better than Alassane Ouattara, than Laurent Gbagbo, and I'm talking about incumbent leader or President Alassane Ouattara, also gets the opportunity to lead the Ivory Coast. After 8 good years, the man fraudulently changes the country's constitution to seek a third term in office, virtually doing the same thing that he stood against, virtually doing the same thing that he fought, and virtually plunging the country into a near civil war. So these are very difficult times for people in West Africa. And it's quite unfortunate some of these instances can be a reversal of political and economic gains. After years of political and economic stability in a country, one leader decides not to leave when his time is up, and it sets the whole country up in flames. And these are some of the things that the economic community of West African states, ECOWAS, should be targeting. People want ECOWAS to intervene in Guinea, but I believe that ECOWAS should have intervened when President Alpha Conde decided to change the country's constitution. That was the foundation of it. That laid the foundation for the current crisis in Guinea. And ECOWAS must be up and doing. They should not only be engaging in reactionary diplomacy, they should, however, intervene. We need more of prevention, not cure. They could have prevented the current happenings in Guinea by preventing President Alpha Conde from seeking a third term in office. People will argue that ECOWAS has that biting power as a supranational entity to compel a sovereign state, the leadership, the government of a sovereign state, to limit its domestic democratic political terms to only 2 terms. Yes, per international law, per international relations, ECOWAS may not have that biting powers. Live in in a global village, and should ECOWAS decide to alienate, suspend any member country that whose government decides to seek a third term in office, I believe that there will be so much socio-economic and political pressure on that government to rescind this decision. Remember when Nigeria decided to
But
close
but
its
but I'm curious. I'm sorry, Michael. Let me just come in there. Let me just butt in. It's interesting that you're asking or calling for the ECOWAS to do something, and we don't forget we also have the African Union, but the ECOWAS obviously deals with us here in West Africa. But who sits, in the ECOWAS? Who are the people who make up the ECOWAS? These same leaders who are somewhat dictatorial in their countries. Why would you want to cut off your nose to spite your face? It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, that's quite an interesting analogy. But fortunately for us, among the 16 member states of ECOWAS, more than 8 of them are serving only 2 terms in government in power. We can make reference to Ghana's president who will be leaving after his 8 years. President Buhari may not be seeking re-election. Same can be said of the presidents of other West African countries, Liberia. In fact, former President George Weah shares my position that ECOWAS should be more reactionary. However, it's interesting, how do you expect Alassane Ouattara, Florina Singbe, or Alpha Conde to vote against another leader in the bloc who is also seeking a third term in office? These are very interesting twists to the whole argument. But I believe
Good
that
point,
with
exactly.
current political diplomacy, the AU, ECOWAS, UN, and other global bodies, the EU, we live in a global village, and no country can survive on its own. What would happen to Guinea? What would happen to Togo? What would happen to the Ivory Coast if the international community decides that we are no longer going to buy cocoa from Ivory Coast? We are not buying crude from Guinea, or we are not buying crude from Equatorial Guinea till President Nguema decides to step down. We are not buying any international commodity from Togo till Foreign Nasingwe hands over power to a newly democratically elected government. Obviously, he will not have money, the economic means to run his country. He will not have the means to pay his soldiers. And once soldiers are not paid, you lack that form of security or guarantee to stay in office. So these are some of the soft powers, economic, social, political soft powers that can be exacted against long-standing dictators in Africa to force them to leave power to a new generation. You don't always have to apply the sticks. Sometimes you need the carrots. You use soft power, soft means, starve them of the much needed funds. Don't do international trade with them. Place a travel restriction and ban on them. And trust me, when they are denied all these opportunities and incentives to rule their countries, they may have no other alternative than to hand over power to a newly elected government.
Well, this is really interesting. Just before we go to the later parts of this conversation, I want to, for those who are watching us, thank you for joining us. We're live on Twitter, we're live on YouTube, we're live on Facebook, and we're talking about the coup that happened in Guinea and, of course, the future of constitutional governments in Africa. And just as my guest has been talking about, he's been emphasizing that we need strong institutions as much as we have strong men on the African continent. Pablo is saying hello from Los Angeles. We have El Shabazz from Lynchburg City. Thank you very much for joining us. This is Ernest Hill. Ernest Hill is saying hello from California. He's in Sacramento, and he says, "My African brothers and sisters, much love to our motherland." And we see Hope Kirubi, who works for CGTN Africa in Kenya, also part of this live coverage. So let me come back to you, Michael. Let's talk about the future for these constituted governments, in Africa. Just as you mentioned earlier on, we see a Jacob Zuma made to face the music, made to account for whatever it is. Now, because it's that issue is sub judice, we really can't discuss it because the end is yet to be seen. But how can we see more accountability in our governments instead of, like you said, strong arming the system? Because one of the other problems we have in my country, Nigeria, is the power of the judiciary. The judiciary seems to somewhat be strong armed by the executive, and it's all obviously affecting how things turn out at the end of the day in the country. And this might also be said for those countries where a sitting president has the power to just, change a constitution and give himself a third term. So, what does the future hold? Because this is 2021, and we're still talking about coup d'etats and governments being overthrown because of the backwardness and the high handedness that's going on in those regimes. Um, how do we get away from this? Because even if we're saying we want strong institutions, human beings are supposed to be in those institutions to make them strong. And it starts from the head to the bottom, doesn't it?
Well, I believe that to be able to have the Africa that we want, an Africa free from military dictatorship, an Africa where the rule of law will work, majority or much of the responsibility lies with we, the ordinary people. Over here in Ghana, the people hold their government to accountability. It would interest you to note that at the foundation of Ghana's current democratic gains were the call the call for reforms, the call for change by ordinary people, market women, students in particular in Ghana have been at the forefront for the rule of law and the return of the country to constitutional rule. From the 70s to 1991, Ghana was in a stage of several uncontrolled, rampant military dictatorship. However, it took young students, our current president then, Nana Akufo-Addo, when there was a total ban on demonstrations in Ghana under the military rule of former President Rawlings, our current president led a people's movement, which was called the People's Movement for Freedom and Justice. Journalists rose up to the occasion. They demonstrated and demanded the return of the country to constitutional rule. In 1977, Ghanaian students and Ghanaian citizens demonstrated against the military government of General Kutu Champon, and they compelled the military government to organize democratic elections and handed over power. And I was very much happy when I saw the youth of Nigeria in the End SARS movement trying to form some form of social resistance against what they perceived as oppression by the country's security forces. Although I was not happy with how the demonstrations ended, of course, it is regrettable that several people had to pay the price with their lives, but these are some of the things that we need to be doing as African youth. We have to hold our leaders accountable. We must not fold our arms and expect the European Union, the United Nations to come in and tell our leaders to do the right thing. When our leaders refuse to do the right thing, first we must vote them out of power, and we must encourage more youth into politics. Look at the age of leaders.
I love that you played into what I wanted to conclude this conversation with. But I am one of the people who reported on the NSAS, and I remember how we all had to, you know, um, turn off our location settings because we all felt that we were being targeted, especially journalists who were reporting and analyzing the issue. It's one thing to say let's go out and protest, but it's another thing if you know that when you go out to protest, that your life can be in danger. For example, there was supposed to be another protest in Nigeria, and the police came out in all its might and its power, and people were being arrested randomly because they were doing what constitutionally is allowed to be done under a democracy in our country. So, where do you build the confidence? Where is the I'm looking for a better word. Where is the driving force to want to push for what you truly believe in or what is yours? Because you believe that as you are under a democratic dispensation, you're allowed to ask for your rights or call for the dividends of a democracy and get some sort of accountability. But if that is not allowed, arms are tied. Don't forget, Twitter is being banned in Nigeria as we speak. There have been bills upon bills to gag the media, to gag free speech. They come in different names and different guises. I mean, the National Broadcasting Commission, which is the body that regulates TV and radio, has asked people, seemingly released all kinds of statements as to how the media should conduct itself in speaking about insecurity or government. And so, where is the democracy in all of this? And why would people even want to bother themselves to protest or ask for the dividends of democracy when there seems to be a gag order out there?
Well, it's one of the most dangerous things to do in Africa is to be an activist demanding for change, seeking for social and political reforms. But what should be the driving force behind our collective activism is that nothing good has been achieved in this world without sacrifice. We see people trying to journey to the US, to the Europe, people risking their lives on the Mediterranean to other parts of the world in search of greener pastures. However, we should know that these countries, these societies, did not build their societies within a day. People actually demonstrated in the US, women, so that women could be given the right to vote. People had to demonstrate for them to be able to have the chance to go to school. It's almost 70 years now since black school children were allowed into all white dominated schools in the US. People had to risk their lives. People paid the price for it. Martin Luther King stood up against racial injustice in the United States. 50 years down the line, we had the first black president in the United States. These are some of the sacrifices that we must let the youth know, that activists must know that yes, the game is risky, but it comes at a price, it comes at a cost. You can't fold your arms, you can't sit in your room and expect to have gold from nowhere. You have to go to the ground, you have to go deep into the ground and dig. We must hold our leaders to accountability regardless of the risk, regardless of the challenges. And when it appears that the obstacles are very difficult for us to engage, like amidst the threat of military and police brutality, like we witnessed in the end SARS protest, I think that the youth and activists across the continent can invite the international community to join in and assist them. However, the biggest message that I have to leaders of the
I'm
continent.
sorry, Michael. Just one more thing. Inviting the international community has made us not have Twitter in Nigeria today. The government, as we speak, is blaming Jack for trying to fund, an ousting of the Buhari administration, and at the time where the I think the British embassy, the British High Commission, I beg your pardon, in Nigeria, the U.S. Consulate, and other foreign consulars here in Nigeria spoke about it. They were invited by the foreign ministry, and of course, it was also more like it's not your business. You cannot be, involved in our private business. So it really looks like we're shutting on all sides, and the average or the common person who's even struggling to get by is wondering, why should I even bother myself when it looks like there's nothing really that you can do and still not be on the losing side? So where is the hope for Africa in all of this?
There is still hope. Let me cite you an example. When President Buhari fell ill in the first term of his government, where did he seek medical treatment? He went to London, right? When the leader of the APC, what's his name, Tinubu, when he fell ill, he's still in London seeking treatment. So imagine if the British
But guess
government
what?
decides.
But guess what? Guess what, Michael? Our medical doctors have been striking even before the president went. He's back. They're still striking, resident doctors. And what are they asking for? They're asking for the normal stipends that they should be paid. They're also asking for more, equipment to protect them when in the midst of COVID, while they're also still having to, because the resident doctors are the guys who majorly running the hospitals. Yes, you have the consultants, but you need more of these resident doctors. And their allowances are meager. They're asking for a little up in their pay. There have been several MOUs that have been signed. The federal government has not honored any of these MOUs, and here we are. But our leaders are going to the UK to get treatments. Again, where is the hope? Because you can't stop a president from going to the UK, can you?
The people, the ordinary Nigerian can't, but the British government can prevent President Buhari or Tinubu from going to London to seek medical treatment. These are some of the hope that we have. Last 2 weeks, the International Monetary Fund gave Nigeria $3 billion to resuscitate its economy as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Nigeria sells its crude oil to the international markets. These are the hope that we have. Because Nigeria cannot survive on its own, because Nigeria needs to trade with the rest of the world, because President Buhari has to travel to London to seek medical treatment, because Nigeria have to buy so many things from China, from the US, from the UK, has to depend on the IMF for financial bailout. We can use all these multilateral, international governmental and non-governmental institutions to exert some form of pressure on dictatorial governments across the sub-region. And the youth in particular have a very, very critical role to play. We simply cannot give up because we are not getting the right results that we want. We begin to lose the battle the very day we lose hope. We cannot lose hope. We must press on with our demand for reforms in Africa. We must press on with our demand for better governance, for rule of law, for democracy, for the respect of the rights of the ordinary people, and most importantly, we must press on for development. At the foundation of our predicament is our underdevelopment, and I believe that once we keep on putting pressure on our governments, we may get the end results. I follow events in Nigeria a lot, and I'm very worried about the security situation in Nigeria. Reading news of armed bandits, Boko Haram seizing military equipment, terrorists having the bravado to even storm a National Defense Academy to go and kill and kidnap a military officer. These are things that happen in failed states. Unfortunately, Nigeria is heading towards that direction. President Buhari is one man. The Nigeria's army is not more than 100,000, but there are over 170 million Nigeria citizens. And I believe that if these people rise up against happenings in their country, the army cannot crack all of them down. President Buhari cannot arrest all of them. How many prisons? Nigeria's prisons cannot even accommodate 500,000 people, let alone 1 million people or 170 million people. Nigeria has so much potential. When Nigeria rises, the rest of the sub-region, the rest of Africa can rise with Nigeria. And these are some of the changes that we want to see on the continent. It is possible, it can be done, and it must be done. The youth must press on for development, they must press on for change, they should not give up hope. We should put pressure on our governments. Over here in Ghana, we do that a lot. There's a lot of civil society engagement. President Akufo-Addo is
Well, I
doing
guess
so
there's a lot
well.
that we need
There's
to
still
learn
people
from Ghana
criticizing.
as Nigerians because, I mean, and again, it also boils down to a system that works. Unfortunately, time is not on our side, but I want to say thank you, Michael and Katia. Is a political analyst. He's also an international relations expert. I want to thank you so much for being part of this conversation. You have touched every single area, and I'm guessing that there is still hope for us on the African continent for good governance.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to thank everyone who's been part of the conversation. If you missed the broadcast, then you can go on my YouTube, Mary Ann Duke Okon. The Okon is spelled Okon. Go on my YouTube and watch a play of this video. Very interesting. You could learn a lot. You can also go on my Twitter. It's at MIMIEYO. That's Mimi Ayo. Or on my Facebook, which is the same as my YouTube, Mary Ann Duke Okon, and enjoy the show. But I will be back next week, Friday, with another story from another African country. And of course, we'll be talking for development. I'm Mariana Cohn from Lagos, Nigeria. It's good night and have a good day.